This is No Days Off, a whitetail strategy series from the Southern Collective. For the next 6 weeks, we're dropping episodes every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, built to get your mind locked in on mature bucks, summer scouting, and the mindset it really takes to kill one of these jokers in the Southeast. Now, I know it's hot in the summertime, and it's tough to think about being in the woods, but if you're waiting for fall, you're already behind. Let's get to work. All right, guys, welcome back to the No Days Off series here on the Southern Collective Hunting Podcast. I'm super jacked up today because I've got one of my greatest friends in the outdoor industry. One of those guys that when we sit on the phone, it's probably going to be an hour to 2 hour phone call. Just a really good dude, really great outdoorsman, great woodsman, and a fellow Southern hunter, Mr. Jake Lishen.
Yeah. The first thing I want to talk about is how dope that new intro is, Parker. I'm fired up on that. I was sitting here jamming out. Yeah, I thought that No Days Off intro got me ready to go. I'm jazzed up right now.
I'm pretty fired up about this series, dude, because it's challenging me in a lot of ways. You know, I've said from a public platform multiple times on podcasts that I think summer scouting is a waste of time. That's a personal opinion, right? That was never for anybody else. I think any time in the woods can be beneficial, but as a father with young kids, and also a wife, the summertime is it's reserved for family in a lot of ways, but this is challenging me to find the time. And I think that that's what's true is you can absolutely find the time to be in the woods right now. And doing something every single day to prepare for the fall. There truly is no days off if you have the right mindset. And so I'm pumped, dude. I'm excited to have you on, and we're going to talk about, in a lot of ways, everyone's favorite thing to hate in the South, and that is heat. We're going to talk about heat a little bit today.
Yeah, the hot weather is coming around the corner. They're actually talking about we're going to break the 100-degree heat index here in North Carolina for the first time here soon. So
Dang.
The struggle bus season is upon us, but I've got a scouting day tomorrow morning. I'm gonna go meet up with a buddy, and we're gonna cover some ground. I'm gonna put him into a spot that I passed an awesome buck in last year. I'm not really hunting that deer specifically, but he and I kind of a good kind of segue into this conversation. Just one of the things I wanted to talk about was just like making friends and building leads to chase. But he and I ended up hunting the same piece of ground, didn't know about it. And he had heard me on a podcast and reached out asking questions about like how to hunt a specific piece of property, and then shared the property, and it was the same property I was hunting of all things. And I was like, dude, I can only tell you so much, but
Small world.
Yeah, small world. But we've ended up becoming good friends. Super nice guy, and kind of he's given me some pieces of intel that were super helpful. And I felt like I was really dialed in on those deer. I mean, I had an opportunity I talked about the last time I was on, I think, where I had a buck I was hunting here in North Carolina at 10 or 11 yards and couldn't see my pins, and I just had to let him walk. I was on that deer pretty good last season, but it's always helpful when you have another set of eyes in the woods and you can build a friend who's, it's not they're hunting and are willing to kind of share intel with you, So the few little bits he told me were valuable, and reinforced things that I already knew. But sometimes that reinforced knowledge is just helpful in building confidence, which doesn't matter how experienced you are. Being confident is key to harvesting big deer, or deer at all.
I'll tell you one piece of competence that many guys don't have, and that is the ability to not be selfish about a whitetail. And like you're saying, like if I meet a guy in the woods, let's just give a scenario. Mm-hmm. If I meet a guy in the woods, I talk to him, we're hunting the same deer, and I notice that he is pretty competent. Like he's a good hunter, and there's a chance this guy might kill the deer. Like my first thing that I'm going to do is try to befriend the guy, unless he's just a total tool to me. Unless it's a bad, if it's a bad interaction, that of course is a different story. But most of them are not. Most interactions are pretty peaceful, pretty nice and
Mm-hmm.
cordial. But if I notice that if I realize this guy knows what he's doing, it's in my best interest, like you said, to befriend him, and because then at the end of the day, if he ends up killing him, your buddy killed a deer, right? Like your
Yep.
buddy killed him, the guy you knew killed him. You can put your hands on it. It doesn't have to be a competition at that point. I don't know that we can ever get rid fully of the competition aspect of it, and the little bit of ego sprinkled in. But I would much rather somebody that I know and helped and hunting buddy killed a deer that I was after rather than some jackwagon that I don't even know. You
No,
know
and,
what I
and
mean?
and he yeah, and he would tell you like I don't share all my trade secrets with him, and I've and it from the standpoint of I'll tell him how I'm hunting, but I'm not telling him where I'm going, and I say that just because there's a very small list of people that I true now. If he listens to this, I love you, buddy. You're a great guy, but we're still building that friendship, and he would know that. So we're trusting each other more as the relationship progresses on. My like best hunting friend Chris or Adam, they know they know where I am, they know what I'm doing, they know what my strategy is, they know the deer I'm chasing because I trust that they're not going to go in and blow me out. This guy is somebody who we're building a really strong rapport, and he's already done a bunch of really awesome things. Just because he hunted that deer last year and really had a hard time and knows that I was on him, and he's backed off a little bit so that it's given me some flexibility. And in exchange, I'm helping him in other ways on other deer and putting him in places to succeed. And it's a mutual relationship. Now, I would never, and I told him, I would never tell him to do that or ask him to do that. If he wants to hunt that deer, then by all means do it. But I'm not going to give up like my secret sauce, at least that I think I have right now, um, to somebody who's kind of new and just come into the fold. Now, he's still an awesome dude. The more the relationship grows, the more you'll share and build on that. But approaching the conversation from a friendly perspective and saying like not just immediately getting defensive because somebody else is on the landscape is the right way to go about it. And I think the thing that allows me to do that is I, quite frankly, like I trust. It's funny. Like I had a buddy. He was like, you just need to bet on the deer, and I do. Like the reality is I'm assuming the deer are going to beat everybody out because they beat me most of the time, and I feel like I'm a pretty thoughtful hunter, and so if I know that I'm really putting all my chips in and hunting hard and I'm still not being successful, then I feel like the odds are that I'm doing more than most people out there. So unless somebody gets lucky, they're probably not going to run into that deer. Now they may blow them out of the area, but I'd rather them blow them out of the area than them kill him if it's somebody I don't know.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
so selfishly, if it's
Yeah,
somebody I do know, like if this guy went in there and killed that deer in a spot that I wasn't hunting, I wouldn't care. I'd be stoked for him. I'd come help him drag it. We'd build a friendship. I'd be cheered. I'd wish that I'd killed him in my spot, but I'm not gonna not be sad. I'm not gonna, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm not going to be upset because he shot a deer that I was hunting for a couple of years. You know,
right.
but at the same point, like he shared a absolute mega giant, a deer probably a good 20 inches bigger than what I'm hunting, in a different piece of public. And he shared like not where the deer was, but the region it was, and was asking questions. So he's doing the same thing. He
Yeah,
knows that I know. He's told me about this deer. He's asked me what I would do and how to approach him and how to find him. And he knows that I'm hunting one big buck. So he's pulled his chips out of that and putting it into the other bucket because we can mutually help each other there. And I think that's, you're more successful the more ground you cover, and the more friends you have the more ground you can cover. you
that's
know
right.
so
So tell me this, Jake. I felt like you were relating this back to hot temperatures and summertime
yep.
stuff. So let's circle back around and kind of put these things together.
Yep.
this relationship with this guy and this big buck that you've been hunting?
Yep. So I think that when you're in the summertime or when you're leading into preseason, the most important thing to do is to hunt a place where a deer of the caliber you're interested in harvesting is.
Yeah.
The old saying is you can't kill big bucks where there aren't any big bucks. Basically, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the reality is you got to be in the right place at the right time to make it happen. And the way to do that is to either just burn your boot leather in summer scout and scout in general. Ideally, you're postseason scouting and running off a sign you're finding. But if you haven't had time to do that, or you move to a new area, or going out of state, any of the latter, I think that you got to lean on friends and locals and leads to try to figure out if you're in the right place at the right time. So, for example, I knew that I was in a right. I have done my homework in the past to know that I was on the right property hunting this deer. But if something were to fall short with that, I have other properties that I'm running cameras on or trying to maintain, as is he. And if I'm in a tight spot where I need a place to go or need a place to scout, the more people you have in the corner, the more opportunities for properties you can whittle away, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so let's say you have a network of 3 or 5 or 6 guys that hunt the region that you're hunting, the central part of a state or the eastern part of a state or western part, whatever it is. Well, everybody's hunting different public, different spots. They have different deer to chase, and like most of us, if you fall into a network of guys who are serious about chasing a specific age class of deer, they usually fall into focusing on a property or two, but they're aware of 3 to 5 other properties or more that are good places to go.
When
And
you say a property or two, are you saying like a section of a piece of public, or are you just saying
of
like
public, yeah.
just a public land piece in general?
No, it could be both. So, for example, it depends on the size. So, like
Sure.
here, and in a lot of places in the South, we have these large expanses of public, whether they're in the mountains or in the low country. Now, sometimes you have small pieces, and the same strategy applies where, for round numbers' sake, let's say you have 1,000-acre piece. Well, there may only be 100 acres of that 1,000 acres worth hunting. But if you haven't put your feet there yet and you're thinking about going and hunting there, you're either going to burn a lot of boot leather to figure that out in a lot of days, or you're going to have a buddy that you can lean on that says, hey, wouldn't mess with this section of the property. I would start looking at this. Go take a poke at that.
Yeah.
It's the same principle for why you would listen to a podcast, which is to pick up like a tip or some direction to narrow down where you're going to spend your time on the landscape. A more refined approach to that is finding people that are good friends of yours that hunt regionally in or around the areas you hunt, and then building a rapport with them, having a mutual trust where they know you're not going to burn them out and they're not going to burn you out, and then being able to rely on them to not for you to go in and take their spots, but for them to validate your curiosity around certain pieces of public and properties so that okay, if I'm going here, it's worth my time.
Sure.
Historically, the genetics are there. Historically, the pressure is low here. Or if you're going to go into a spot that's high pressure, you can tailor your game plan to fit what that property is going to be dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think over the course of the years, talking to a lot of people who are killers, and as I grow in my own hunting and learning how and where to target big deer, I've even found that there's only so many places that have whatever that standard is that you're talking about. For me,
Mm-hmm.
there's only so many places in Alabama where I can go and feel like this is going to produce a 140-inch deer
Yep.
yearly. Like I have a chance and the longer you hunt, the more you can narrow that down. And I find that a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys who are killers, they year after year are killing deer in the same, let's say, 400-acre block of woods, because they just realize and have learned what's around, how it's being hunted. They've learned the pressure that comes in there, and they know, if you're talking public, they know what's on the private surrounding it. That's a big piece of it, dude.
It is. Yep.
That is such a big piece of that puzzle is knowing what the access is like on the private around it, or the access or the management or what they're doing.
Yep.
Almost every place that I've ever found that repeats itself in producing big deer in any state is got good private next to it.
Yep. And I think that that's a huge talking point, and it's also like so you have before the podcast, Parker and I were talking all about business and different tiers of life structure. So I'm going to go back to the tiers conversation here. You have
Yeah.
tiers of things that are worth focusing on, and it has to be based around like, for example, um, I'll go back to the reference from my buddy and I who were hunting the same property. That place is extremely difficult to hunt. Like, very difficult. Probably one of the most difficult places I've hunted anywhere in the country of the 10 or 12 states, whitetail states I've spent time in. It's very thick. It's tough to be around. It's tough to get into. The wind is all over the place. It's just you don't see a lot of deer. It's just really, really difficult. And he doesn't have the number of days to hunt consecutively that I do. So he was really spinning his wheels for a long period of time because he's trying to hunt it one day this week, another day next week. And each time it's this brutal long hike in, and the signs changing, the weather's changing, everything is shifting, and you can't build a rapport. So it's like, it's not always about what the best possible property is, but what the best possible property is that you can hunt with the time you have available. So
Yep.
so there are properties that I have found personally where I'm like, man, this is a killer place. I bet I could kill a stud here every year, but I just can't get there. I literally don't have the time to get there and hunt it the way the property needs to be hunted. And I have to be okay with walking away and going to a piece where there is a deer that I can hunt. And to his credit, he has a stud in a place that he can more effectively hunt than the place that I'm hunting. And it just is a difference in trade-off on time, on like, what does it take for you to be successful on a given piece of property? Well, I say that, I'm going to take a step back. What does your area provide, and what properties will provide you the opportunity at a deer of the caliber you're interested in? And then of those properties, which ones can you feasibly hunt with the time that life is giving you? And those are two big things where I think guys oftentimes they get jazzed up and they jump at the first big deer that they get on camera that's 4 miles deep on a piece of public, but then they realize they can only get to it twice a month. Well, that doesn't do you any good, quite frankly. Like,
Dude, this is so good because this is really what No Days Off is all about. This is what it's all about. It comes from, I mean, I, you've heard people, and you kind of just did it. I'm not trying to call you out. It's not intentional, but everyone says where I hunt, where I live is the hardest place to hunt, right? You hear that? That's kind of cliche
correct.
for people to say that. There's guys here where I live in Alabama. Oh, if you can kill one in Alabama, you can kill one anywhere. Same thing. There's guys who freaking live in Missouri who are saying, "Oh man, you can kill one on Mark Twain. You can kill one anywhere," and it's just so not true. I'm sure there is a hardest area ever that does exist. I
It's
don't
the
know
Everglades. We'll just give it up to the guys in the Everglades.
Yeah, all right, Everglades guys, you got it. You got number one. But this goes to the guys in the Everglades who are listening to this. If you live there, you got time,
Yep.
right? Like if you live within an hour of this place, of wherever it is that you spend a lot, you can find the time. And what you're talking about, like you might be able to only go into a place 4 miles deep on public. Through the course of 365 days, you can find 12 times that you can be there and learning
Yep.
something and hanging a camera. And if your lifestyle doesn't, if your summer times are off limits, go in there once or twice, put up a cell camera, and go and plan 3 days to hunt it
Yep.
consecutively. And do not make excuses. So here's where I'm at. Like, I see what you're saying, because I've done it many times. I've got places that are here at home that are so far and so deep, but I'm sitting there thinking, I'm thinking about, okay, I can't feasibly get there. I would have to leave at midnight. Like I would have to
Mm-hmm.
start my walk at midnight. First off, not impossible. That's still doable.
Agreed. Not
You know
impossible.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like it's not impossible if you want it and that's where you got to hunt, like you'll make it happen. I understand where you're saying about
Oh no,
the
you're fine.
places that you can feasibly get to. But I truly don't think there is any excuse for a guy who's talking about hunting his home turf,
I think it's
whether
fair. I mean, I
whether it
think
be public or private.
it's what you're willing. It's what you're willing, and I get it. It applies to the podcast model here. Or what we're talking about, just with no days off. I guess I look at it as like I approach everything from the thought process that when somebody has made the decision to go hunt, they're going to hunt as hard as I am. At least that's my. I'm just assuming everybody in the woods is that way, but
Yeah.
sometimes life just doesn't allow you. For example, some properties may only be a morning property, or some properties may only be an
Yeah.
evening property. So I guess my thought process with that is just more prioritizing where you're spending your time in a way that is going to allow you to be successful so that when you do spend your time there, you're increasing your odds exponentially to be successful. I'm not saying to not, and once again, I'll refer back to like my buddy would tell you, I have told him, like, dude, run cameras. Like, if you're going to hunt it strategically. Like you just said, Parker, pick out a window of time that you see annual trends and data on, or when a deer is on a scrape, and then hunt it. But if you can't hunt the property the way that it needs to be hunted, find one that you can work with in your wheelhouse of availability, and then hunt it to the best of your ability, versus
Yeah.
spinning your wheels. It's a little bit of both of the same thing. Like I don't want to deter somebody from hunting a piece that is in their backyard, but if you're never successful on a property because you don't have the ability to hunt it the way that you need to hunt it, then at some point you need to figure out how to make a change to put yourself in a position to succeed. Whether that's going to a consecutive day plan where you take a home style rutcation, if you will, and you have 3 to 5 days where you're just on that piece of property, or you pick a different piece that's more attainable and then you try to figure that piece out, find the big buck that lives there, and then you hunt him to the best of your ability because he's approachable. Does that make sense?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not. That is not to. What I said is not to combat what you said at all.
Mm-hmm.
It supports it. Um, it supports it a lot. I think. Uh, I have places that I invest time into that I can drive 45 minutes um, to get there, and uh, not a long boat ride, pretty easy boat ride. I could even walk in if I absolutely needed to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's got a few turkeys, it's got a few decent deer around, and I'm going to go to that when I need a quick hunt, and I put time into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know what's there. I know what my expectations are. My expectations are certainly not a 150 in this place.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have places where I'm like, I mean, expectation is kind of like 130 to 150s are here. They live here,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I'm gonna be after in this spot, right? And so you
Yep.
you, you do have to set those. And again, I go back to, I think if you take the no days off mindset and approach,
I agree.
it's a yes and it's not a either or. You don't have to choose one.
I think it's
Um,
fair. I think it's a fair. I mean, fair thought process. I think it's I think if you're a guy where we'll kind of isolate it down and say that you don't have an option. Like you've been in a tough spot. You're hunting a place and you don't have the option to change properties. Then like you're saying, Parker. I think that like doing your homework is the only way you're going to be successful. And you have to do your homework. So I think that's fair, and something people should take into consideration. And I think that starts with like the very first thing that I always try to do is I'm trying to maintain a community of guys that I trust, like we talked about with leads and friends. I'm trying to maintain a community of guys and a network of people that can at least get me started in the right direction. So if you're starting from zero, and like I'm going to go to a new state, or I'm going to go to a state that I've been hunting but maybe not hunted public, or maybe just a new area of a state, I'm going to first call on my network and ask, like, hey, what do you guys know about this piece of public? What do you know about this? What do you know about that? Parker, you know, I've done that in North Dakota and in Alabama. Your and I's conversations really helped put me in a great area in Alabama. And I did the same thing. I asked around other buddies in Alabama, and now we're in a killer deer camp spot there, right? So
Yep.
that's the first step, is like, are you going to a place that's going to accomplish the goal that you are trying to accomplish? And the only way to know that is by doing your research, looking at even stuff is like, I like looking at old forums, just to understand what the quality has been like on this piece of property for a long period of time. So sometimes you can just Google hunting in XWMA, and sometimes you'll find an old forum. And if you just sift through all of the all of the BS about people complaining about pressure, you can run across some good intel every now and then. And then the most reliable thing is just details from friends, locals, and I also have down to talk about is wardens, or local fish and wildlife officers. So one, you're doing a twofold there on your very top high end planning session. The first thing you're doing is you're finding out who the warden is, which is good for you, because we all should ask those individuals questions and be on a talking basis with them. In the regions
You
that
do
you're.
that a lot. Yeah, I've known you to bring up game wardens that you've had conversations with in multiple places that you've hunted,
Well,
more than average.
I don't want to take credit for that. I used to not do that, and then years back, 5 or 6 years ago, I got the idea from Greg and Aaron at THP, because they would always, as part of their homework when they go into a new place, they're very they're going to make an effort to call the local warden and wildlife officers and ask questions. And the reality is most of the time, those guys are working during hunting season. They see everything. They know where they're checking cars. They know where they're seeing people parked. They may not be able to tell you exactly where a giant is living, but they could tell you some historic information about pressure and where you're going to run into people, where you won't run into people, and maybe where deer populations are good or bad. And they're great resources for you to be able to lean on in your area, because they're on the ground every single day. They're the
Yeah.
local that you have access to asking questions to. And I've had great success with that in North Dakota, in Illinois, in other Midwestern states, even here at home, because if you don't happen to have friends or locals that you can get a hold of via Instagram or Facebook or wherever, that's a public official that is not obligated to, but if you're friendly, will be friendly to you and probably point you in the right direction, you know?
Yeah, and you know what's funny? I was just sitting here thinking everything that you've mentioned pretty much so far has been things that you can do inside, and
Yep.
talk about combating the heat. Like, you're just doing all those things when you can, indoors, from your
Correct.
computer, from your phone, in between job sites, whatever you're doing. Like, you can do all of that stuff. You can find the time. If you find that you're watching a Netflix show, then you had the time and you didn't use it the way
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're talking about. That's just the reality of it. We have
Correct.
the time. We all have the time to do things like this that you're talking about,
Yep.
and it can all be done in the off season.
And there's the beautiful thing. There's a lot of things I hate about social media, but one of the beautiful things is it allows you some level of connectivity. And some of my best friends have been people who have, like, in the hunting space, or people that I continue to talk to, or folks that have sent me a DM, and then we chat for a little bit. And I'm a big talk on the phone guy, which I would recommend everybody try to make an attempt to do so. If like Parker said at the beginning of the podcast, our conversations will take an hour or two. It's because I like to hear your voice. I like to hear I like to talk through things and ideas and hear the inflection and understand, what you're thinking, and enjoy a conversation. That's, the way it works. And that's how you build trust in somebody.
Yeah.
And if you're just sitting there DMing somebody, well, that's great. But if they're a resource in an area for you, whether it's a wildlife officer, whether it's a buddy, whether it's somebody you just met on social media, the bow hunting leagues are big right now, any of that type of stuff, those relationships are only going to go so far over text message. Like ask them, like, hey, when can you jump on the phone? Talk for an hour or two, like build a relationship, ask some questions, you know, jump into something that builds a friendship with somebody in an area that not only is beneficial for you as a hunter, but also, build friends in that area. If you go in there and shoot a slammer, it's awesome, but it's a whole lot more awesome if you can call a buddy that you've been chatting with and he can come help you drag it out, even if you don't hunt there very often. Like
Yeah.
I've hunted Illinois the last 3 years in a row, and every year I've been there, I've made a new, really good friend. Like the
Yeah.
first year, I was become buddies with a guy that every single fall we touch base with each other when I go out there, and he tells me where he's hunting, and I tell him where I'm hunting, and if one of us kills one, we go help each other. And then I shot one, and it ran on a neighbor's private. Now I'm friends with that neighbor's private, the landowner there, and we keep in touch about bucks that are hunting, that are on the public and on the private. And then this year I met a trad bow guy, and now we're buddies. And I'm like, I almost shot the buck that he ended up shooting 2 days later. So it's like, we're all doing the same thing, and you slowly build up this rapport with people that you meet in the field or you meet on social media, and your life as a hunter becomes a lot less like foggy. You have places to go and people you can lean on.
Jake, I didn't hear a single thing that you said after you said you became friends with the landowner's private.
Yeah.
My 12-year-old inside of me is like,
I became friends with the private landowner. There we go.
I'm going to trust that everything you said after that was great, though.
It was great. I think it was great. Hopefully it brings value. But the point being is, like, we're kind of talking in circles here, so I'll move us along. But the first step in my process every year is one, to determine the states that I want to hunt. So like for me this year, I'm going to hunt North Carolina, Virginia, and Illinois or Ohio. So those are my Illinois or Ohio are interchangeable. So it could be one, could be the other, depends on my access and my permission and what I get there, what public I end up getting time to go look at.
I'm assuming you've got it structured to where North Carolina and Virginia are kind of your home bases.
Correct.
You can hunt there from home, and your Illinois, Ohio is going to be kind of your November trip. Is
Correct.
That kind of what you're planning on?
Yep. So, and the thing is, as I think we've talked about, if you've listened to us talk on other podcasts before, like one of the things I've learned is to not stretch yourself too thin. And in the past, I've learned that, or in prior experience, I've learned that I really can't hunt more than 3 states a year. And when I talk to, like, well, is what I mean. Like, I can't actually apply time to them and do a good job. Now I'm leaving Alabama out of that because that's in January. It's following year. It's after Christmas. It doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
We'll be in Alabama for a gun deer camp, but that doesn't count. But for like my main fall hunts, I can really only pull off 3. And if I'm really on a good deer, I'll cut that down to 2. So my interest is first picking the states that I want to go to, and then picking the places in those states that I think I want to be in. So the region of the state. So like, let's say it's, central Illinois, southern Ohio, and then I have my home spots in North Carolina and Virginia. Well, now my question is, who do I know in those places that I have to travel to? That, like, do I know anybody that lives near there? Do I know anybody that's hunted there? Can I call them up and be like, hey man, I'm thinking about going to this state. I'm thinking about going here. What can you tell me? I'm not asking you to give me a spot, but I'm asking you to give me a head start. What should I be looking for? Are people hunting saddles a lot, or should I be looking at, north facing slopes, south facing slopes? What's the cover like? All of those things are going to help you, like you said earlier, Parker, from the comfort of your couch, in deciding where you want to go and what you want to do.
Or shameless plug for the Whitetail Road Show. You come to the Whitetail Road Show in Georgia.
That is true.
And you meet some dudes. Start networking, dude. Like those opportunities like that, which that's coming up I believe when this episode drops next week, if not this week, um, when this episode is.
Yep.
So make plans to go to that kind of stuff. You know, there's expos and road shows. Y'all are doing road shows all over.
Yep. We got
Um,
4 shows this year: Georgia, Ohio, Virginia, and Iowa. Um, and those are just, there's any number of those, but like you said, Parker, they're community-based events that help you connect with people and build a relationship as at the same time as you're learning. Whether you're learning about gear or learning about tactics, the intent is to build a bigger, stronger, better community in the whitetail space. And you know, that's what we're talking about here, is
yeah,
leaning on your community and leaning on your network. So
yeah. The bigger community you can build, like you're talking about, the more opportunities that you're going to find. And we don't do it for the sake of opportunity, um, for sure. But it's definitely a byproduct.
it is, and I think that it's one of the things that hunting for a long time became such a solo man's focus because of the pursuit of antler inches. I think it's something that is, people are starting to realize it's a lot more fun when you do things as a community, versus, you know, I think 5 or 10 years ago it was like you know, and even probably upwards of recently, it was every man for himself. Nobody talked to anybody, and it got really ruthless. And I think that the only way we're going to get away from that, or, you know, somebody who's listening to this, is to take, you know, to take steps yourself to actually invest into a community. And like we said, it doesn't mean you have to share every detail and share your big buck spot, you know, with somebody else, but share in the experience and build a community around yourself. Because, you know, like we said, it's a whole lot more fun when you harvest something and you have people to celebrate it with you and celebrate the hard work that it took to get it done, versus, you know, being a lone ranger out there that nobody will ever hear about or know about.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so, but go ahead.
No, it's funny. I think about how many opportunities I'm given on a day to day basis to lie to people who reach out, who are trying to build a network. Like how often I get the opportunity to tell somebody, yeah, you should go and hunt, this piece of property because I heard that's where I'm at. Uh, and I typically do not. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't always tell the whole truth, but I'll usually point people in a very good direction.
Yep.
That does me no harm.
Yep.
Doesn't do anybody any harm. It doesn't hurt anyone to be nice. And all the WMAs are listed on the Alabama website. It's not like they're secrets.
Yeah.
But point people in the right direction,
Well,
and
and
it goes a long ways.
even if it's just, so I guess the way I would look at this too is, like, if somebody's sitting there apprehensive of this conversation right now, it's not even necessarily saying that you have to point somebody to, like, a good spot, but give them, or if you're a person seeking information, just be looking to expand your knowledge base in that area so you know what you're getting into, right? So, like, for example, if I was going to go hunt Central Alabama, well, like, some of the giant tracks there are, it may take a whole season for me to build an understanding to be successful in some of the real remote places, and Parker can attest to that. You know, I don't have that much time, so when I called Parker 4 years ago and asked him where I should go in Alabama, he's like, well, you can go here, there's big deer there, but I don't know if you can get it done in a week. You know, and that was the exact conversation. He's like, I would think about going here. And we did, and we had a great time, you know. And Parker didn't give me an exact spot or a place to go, but he just was like, check out this area of the state. He's like, this is a better spot for the amount of time that you have, and that might help you out. And like he said, it didn't do him any harm, didn't do me any harm, and it only made our trip an opportunity better. And
Hey,
I
and
think,
you learned things about that place in particular that I didn't know, and I used later.
yep,
It worked in my favor. It
yep,
wasn't it wasn't all it's definitely, when you do that, it's no strings attached at that point because you and I are buddies then.
yep,
Um, but I would not hesitate to call you and ask you anything about anywhere that I'm going at any point in time. Um, because I know, like, whenever you ask me that's an opportunity. It wouldn't have been an opportunity I had to necessarily lie to you. because you were my friend, already. I emphasized that a couple times, but you were already my buddy at that time, so I had no issue doing that. Um, but I would tell other people that I didn't know
Yeah.
something similar. I might not give them quite the detailed information, but like,
Yep.
hey, check out the Black Belt region of Alabama. That's known for having big deer. If you're not local, you might not know that, but figure that out and look along that. You'll find some big deer.
Yep. And
Um,
it's a good starting point so that you know that you're going to go somewhere and you have some confidence.
yeah,
You're not going just a shoot, just especially when you're hunting in the southeast. It's no, I don't think it's any like disguise to anybody that it's like life is getting more and more expensive, and I'm traveling less. Not just because I can't hunt states, as not only because I think it's more effective for me to only hunt 3 states a year, but also because I just can't afford to hunt as many states as I could 6, 7 years ago.
dude.
It's more expensive. Tags are getting more expensive. The cost of everything is more expensive. So if you're a guy who lives in the southeast and let's say you're a Georgia guy and you only have time to hunt Georgia, Alabama, or Georgia, Kentucky, or Georgia, Tennessee, you know, um, whatever that looks like for you, having a network of people you can lean on and then being understanding of what your goals are is really going to be helpful in making sure that you have a good time, which is, obviously first and foremost, and then ideally putting yourself in a position where either you can learn year over year and grow in your knowledge of a specific property because you like landscape, you like what you're seeing, you like what you're hunting, or have success the year you go. And you have to be able to look at it as either of those things are wins. Regardless of whether you go there and strike out this year, well, don't leave with a sour taste in your mouth if you like the landscape and you were on deer. Maybe you didn't harvest what you were looking for, but you learned a lot and you'll be in a better position next year. So
Yeah,
just kind of changing that mindset is I think really advantageous for guys.
dude.
It is for
There,
me.
the whole mindset of hunting, focusing on a few places rather than a lot of places. It's like when travel turkey hunting became a thing and guys were posting up numbers, shooting, 10 to 20 turkeys a season. It's really fun. There's really not, it's not hard to, it's not as hard to go and target a mature gobbler in 6 states a year, because a mature
Mm-hmm.
gobbler is a mature gobbler. They're pretty much the same. But what you're talking about when you're truly wanting to kill a certain type of deer, you can certainly kill 2.5-year-old bucks, 3-year-old bucks, and kill 12 of them if you want. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's doable. But when you're really kind of trying to narrow down into a certain type of deer, or at least a certain age class of deer, um, like making big huge plans to go out and do that 5 or 6 different times in
It's
5 or 6
tough.
different states, that's a superpower, dude. Like, if you're doing it,
it's a,
everybody who's tried it, and we've had good years, right? Like,
yeah.
I've had years where I killed a bunch of deer, a bunch of bucks in different states. But they were, I mean, it's good luck, at that point. It's hard to do that over and over again when you've got to balance everything else out.
Yep.
Like, and like you said, Tennessee just went up like what, 28% on their non-resident license.
Yep.
Um,
Ohio just went up to like $350, or something like
it's
that.
crazy, and whatever, it is what it is. I'm not even mad about it because it's forcing me to do. I'm mad about it as an American. I'm mad about it, but as a hunter and a businessman and a father and husband, I'm kind of like, okay, it just kind of forced me to prioritize.
hmm
And I'm finding the same, like you're saying, I'm finding the same as I search for bigger deer, or try to do that more often. I can't really afford to do it in other places. I can do it here though. Like,
Well,
I
it's
can do it at home.
yeah, and Parker, you and I've talked about this before too. One of the big realizations that I've had over the last like 3 seasons that like I'm really taking to heart now was because of all of the knowledge that I've built at home and all the time that I'm spending here at home. which is the bulk of my year still, I'm chasing deer that are, 125 to 150 at home. And oftentimes I was leaving those deer to go hunt other deer in other states and shooting other deer in other states that were of the same caliber of the deer that I was hunting here. Because I don't care what anybody says, a 150 or better is very hard to find no matter what state you go to, except for maybe Iowa. And even there, it's hard to kill them, you know? So the reality is like, if you're on good deer and you know that they're in the state that you live in and are accessible to you, whether it's on public or private, you have the ability to harvest them. You don't have to necessarily try to run as a bunch of these different states to find them. Like, don't leave deer to find deer. It's like, don't leave
Yeah.
turkeys to find turkeys. Don't leave fish to find fish. Like, you've got them there. Now I'm not saying if I don't hit a dead point in my season, I might not bounce to a different state. Like, I may prioritize, I know season's really good in North Carolina in this window, and then I may go to Virginia for this window, and then I may go to the Midwest for this window. But, like, I learned a hard lesson last year because I was getting my butt whooped. Had an opportunity at a stud here last year, wasn't able to convert, and then left. And right after I left to run to the Illinois, I left, went to Illinois, and for like 10 days, my buck was daylighting on camera where I could have killed him. And I would have been happy to have shot that deer in the Midwest, let alone in North Carolina. And had I just been like, no, I don't need to go to the Midwest this year, I'm going to shoot the deer that I have, that is a deer that I would be happy to shoot anywhere in the country. I think it's a matter of coming to terms with that perspective and being open to the fact that sometimes you like have something really great right out your back door, and just because it's so close, it's easy to overlook.
Yeah, dude.
So
I can't. I think I had the same experience this year, and it was here at home, and there was, dude, it was almost like the Lord was just telling me straight up, you need to do this in your life for other reasons, but here, let me prove it to you. When I was in Kansas, there was bucks fighting in front of a camera. November the 7th, they were fighting in front of this camera like daily, every day. They would show up right at daylight, right at the beginning of daylight. They'd fight. Then another buck would show up. There was like 5 different bucks. 2 of them were really nice deer,
yeah,
125 or bigger type deer. And my butt's in Kansas. I've talked about that on podcasts. That's what helped me come to this realization. And I do think that for a lot of us, sometimes we just have to experience it to know, like you got to have that experience. You're like, frick, man. Like, I get it's Kansas. I get it's Iowa. I get it's Missouri. And certainly maybe if you had the same amount of time, your odds would be way better.
yeah.
But you don't, but you do at home. You do in Louisiana, and there's still big bucks in Louisiana.
Yeah, and I'm still thinking about it from the perspective, like, if I think my perspective now is more so focus on my home ground, which is, North Carolina and Virginia for me I'm not far from the line, so I can hunt both of them within an hour or two pretty easily. And I have family in both, let alone living in North Carolina. So for me, it's easy to hunt those states. I can hunt them just like they're my backyard. And if I'm on a really good one, I don't need to up. Like, my Midwestern trips are fun. I really enjoy them, but it's still deer hunting, and it's like know when to hold them, know when to fold kind of a thing. Like,
Yeah.
don't just like, don't sell your soul and just run to the Midwest because of the idea of a better experience. If you're already doing a killer job at chasing a great deer at home, and even in my best years, I think I've harvested 3 bucks. My very best years. Well, in North Carolina, I can harvest 2. So most of my favorite years of hunting, I've shot 2 bucks in different states. And it's like, well, I would have been just as tickled to death as done that in the Southeast, in the state that I live in, as I would have to have done that one in North Dakota and one in Illinois, or one in Illinois and one in North Carolina, however that shaped out. And it's like, if you have bucks that you consider good bucks to hunt anywhere, Now that's not everywhere in the country, so this may apply to you, it may not, but just something to take into account. If you have bucks that are good enough that you'd be happy shooting them wherever you went in the state in the country, um, then you should prioritize that time and effort, I think, above all else. If you don't have that, then like if I lived in Florida, there's great deer in Florida, but I would probably prioritize my Midwest trip a little bit more heavily than maybe I do just trying to, hunt in Florida, because I just don't have access to the same caliber of deer that I might have in other places if that's my goal, So,
But well, this would be a rabbit trail. I'm not even going to say it. I'm not even going to start it.
there are
Um,
giants in Florida. There are
there are
giants in
giants in
Lawrence.
Florida, and there's
There are
some pretty
giants in Florida.
crazy quota opportunities that have the type of bucks that you could be happy to kill
Uh,
anywhere, and
a
most
good
locals know it.
a good buddy of mine's killed a bunch of deer, like a handful of deer in the 40s on public land on those same quota hunts. Awesome dude.
What's his name?
He's not bashful about. He posts them. So is Ryan Nitz on Instagram.
Ryan Nitz. I didn't want to
Um,
misname him, but I thought that's who you're talking about.
the guy's an
That dude's killed
absolute
some big
killer.
deer.
Killed some
He's a
giant
slayer,
deer
dude.
that I would shoot anywhere in the country, like giant deer. Hats off to that guy, because he puts in the work. Like he
Yeah,
is running cameras, he's scouting, he's putting in for those quota hunts. He knows what he needs to know. So there's big deer there. I think it's more. I look at everything from an odds perspective. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
what are my odds to do that? So I guess kind of bringing it back around, um, is like if I have a deer that I'm happy to be chasing and would be happy to harvest anywhere in the country, I'm going to be focusing on him here more so than anywhere else. And then once I feel like I have done my due diligence in attempting to harvest him, then I'll go out of state for a planned hunt or for a planned
Yep.
deer camp that's more experience driven, because I just flat out don't have the time to put the effort in to kind of guarantee myself an opportunity at some of these big out of state hunts. So it's like my priority is a little bit different there. It's more about the community experience
Sure.
versus the solo artist experience that I have here back home. And it's like I'd rather go to Illinois and put together a 5-guy Midwestern deer camp. We all hang out, or do the same thing. We do it every year in Alabama. And yes, I come home happy with the bucks and the deer we shoot every year, but I'm also more so happy about the memories that I make on those trips
Hmm.
than the rack that I bring home. You know, so
Well, and truthfully, you can, if in a good year for an out of state trip, this is not people that I'm thinking of. There's some people who prioritize out of state trips and they make a lot of trips to do cameras or whatever. I'm not talking to you. I'm
mm-hmm,
talking to the average guy that maybe can plan. Let's say he's got a Missouri trip planned. He might plan one trip up there beforehand in the summertime to prep, and let's say 5 days, 5 day trip beforehand. I'd say that's a stretch still. And let's say he does 9 days of hunting in
mm-hmm,
November in Missouri. Well, you're at about less than 15 days that a guy can put into those opportunities may result in killing a nice deer. Like
yeah,
you have a better chance of those 15 days producing a nice deer,
by
a
the
big
odds,
deer by the odds. Yeah, exactly
yeah,
what you're talking about. But if I have 30 days consecutively that I can put into, uh, not consecutively, sorry, 30 days collectively
yep,
that I can put into a world class deer at home, well, I still think my odds are more in my favor to kill the deer at home
I
because
agree,
30 is even conservative. Like you
yep,
could do so much work daily. You could do daily work on a local deer.
yep, and on top of that, like I think it's I don't want to diminish the value of somebody going. If you live in the Southeast and you go to the Midwest and shoot a giant deer,
Sure.
but because it's hard to do wherever you are. But I tell you what, I don't think there's anybody that's gonna like deny the fact that there's something really special about doing it at home and being
Hmm.
consistent about doing it at home, and the rewarding feeling you get knowing that you're shooting. You go to Illinois or you go to Iowa or one of these states, and yes, it's difficult, it's hard to do, but quite frankly, there's a bunch of bucks that are that caliber killed in that state every year. Like, it's not necessarily uncommon. But if you come to North Carolina or you live in North Carolina and you're consistently shooting deer that's like 130, 140 or better, that's really doing something, and I think that it's very attainable here. We have the caliber of deer, and there are enough of them, in my experience over living here 8 years, to to consistently do it. But it's hard, but the reward for being able to do it is there. And I'm the deer that I'm the most proud of are my deer that I've harvested here, that are my
Mm-hmm.
bigger deer. You know, so I guess just something to take into consideration when you're planning your season. But to kind of get us back on track, so I would pick your states. So for me, like I said, this year I'm hunting North Carolina, Virginia, and then one Midwestern state. The Midwestern state is a flip flop, depends on how my season's going. If I get one down early in one of my home states, then I'll maybe more apt to take the leap and run to go to the Midwest for an experience hunt as opposed to being at home. But my priority is how can I hunt my home spots as best as I possibly can here in the Southeast. Once I know that, just for the sake of understanding time, because it's easy to get snuck up on, I'm trying to Excel spreadsheet cost of my tags, cost of my travel, room and board, how I plan to sleep there, all of the things that I need. So in my opinion, even if it's a matter of hunting in my state, but hunting 2 hours away where I can't get to and from back home very readily, or maybe I don't want to make that drive, being disorganized is the killer of success, in my opinion. So prioritizing your budget, prioritizing how you're going to do everything, prioritizing what gear you're going to need based on the time of the season you're going to be there, having all of that done are all things that you can do this time of year. Like, I know I have my clothes laid out on hangers in the structures of like my early season, what I'm wearing in early season, what I would wear in mid season, what I would wear in late season, just so that I know that if there's any pieces that are too damaged from prior years, or that I don't want to get to November and be 3 days before I need to go to Illinois and
Yeah.
be like, oh crap, I've actually got a huge hole in this jacket, or I remember freezing my butt off in this thing, I don't have time to fix that problem, So picking your states, going through your budget, Excel spreadsheeting everything, looking at your gear list, assessing the quality of the stuff you have. Do you have a little more spending money this year? Do you have a little less? How does that play into what gear you have or can bring, or what states you can hunt, or how you're going to hunt them? Those are all things that I'm doing right now. It's not just me telling you to do them, they're things that I actually do. So once I've done that, I'm focusing on, going back to that leads development thing. What friends do you have in certain places? And then from there, you're kind of figuring out public or private, in this, for the sake of this conversation, in my life, most of my hunting is done on public, especially out of state and even in state here in North Carolina. I have one private piece I have access to that I hunt 5% of the time to shoot does.
Yeah.
But otherwise, most of my deer are on public. So you're building leads via the community that you have. And if you don't have the community, now we start talking about like, what can you do in your summer scouting to be more successful at finding deer? And I think it's a double-edged sword of digesting information from relevant podcasts. Like Parker has a wealth of knowledge. If you're going to hunt a Southeast mountain state, you could jump on and listen to a conversation with Nathan Killen or whoever that's a great mountain hunter. Try to pick up little bits of information that he may drop that's applicable to the type of the landscape on the public you've chosen to hunt based on your leads in the state you're going to be in. And then spend time trying to understand your maps. I get crap all the time from people in my life for just staring at OnX like my life depends on it. It's like a large percentage of my spare time. If I'm just watching TV or there's a sporting event on, or if I'm bored at the bar, like I'm popping on OnX and probably being a little obsessive compulsive about it, more so than I would like to admit. But I like looking at my spots and trying to think about everything that I can think through to make myself feel prepared. I want to be able to close my eyes and be able to like toggle that property around in my eyes like in my head and know where I am and what I'm doing and have all of the planned out thought, like what this deer could do and what he couldn't do, or what I think the deer are going to do on that landscape. And then be able to, when I finally get to go boots on the ground there, to try to validate that.
Mm-hmm.
So my big thing is coming up with what I think the deer are doing based on all of the things we've already talked about. Your leads, your map scouting, your prior experience listening to podcasts, and then not necessarily going onto a property and picking where you're going to hunt, but validating what the deer are doing on that property based on everything that you've heard and learned. Or like being like, okay, my knowledge structure at this point is telling me that what I'm seeing is not right. I need to go find a new property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so don't try to like force a round peg into a square hole. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we've both felt that in states like North Dakota.
Yep.
Um, it always seems like there's something which may be able to be determined by using this network. There always seems to be one thing. North Dakota was the thick hardwoods, dude. How, like, you look at a piece of woods there in North Dakota from a map, and you're like, oh, look at these beautiful open hardwoods, because that's what you're used to. And a North Dakota native could have told you, no, bud, you can walk through those hardwoods, bud.
That's
Like,
thick.
they're thick. They're all thick.
Yeah.
Your best shot at it. I mean, it's field edges, and you just don't really think that.
So where I would think about how I would use that information is like if you found somebody who had been up there before, like let's just say you were going to make a trip to North Dakota and you happened to ask Parker about that, not knowing, and Parker's like, "Oh no, dude, those woods are thick. It's hard to walk through those." Well, you may realize that you're not going to be able to scout 5 or 6 properties in a day. You may need to pick a property to scout and to hunt, and then hunt that property to the best of your ability, as opposed to if you go to Eastern Kentucky and you're hunting big Appalachian hardwoods. Well, you can cover a lot of ground really quickly because you can see a lot of ground, you know,
Yeah.
and you can drive a lot of ground, versus you may not have those experiences in other parts of the country. I had very similar experiences in Nebraska on some of the public that I hunted out there, is that it was exuberantly thick, and the only way to be successful is you had to pick a place that you felt like had all the intangibles that a deer needed, and then really hone in on that property and figure out how they're using it and learn it, and hope that you were going to kill the good buck or one of the good bucks that was there, as opposed to trying to be like, I'm going to scout 5 or 6 properties and then boil it down. So knowing what the landscape looks like is huge. It's a huge piece of intel.
Absolutely. It's tough to describe that to people who haven't traveled a whole lot, but there's always something.
I
Michigan was cattails. Some of that in North Dakota, you think you're going to be walking through an open field and like, oh no, that's
Cattails.
cattails. And once you realize what cattails look like on a map, you're good. Like you,
Yep.
you can pretty much pick it out and know what's passable and what's not. But those little pieces of information are pretty much invaluable. You got to have them. And
I,
most of the time, for me, if I don't have a network, man, I'm lost until the day that I get there.
yeah.
It
Yep.
ruins the whole plan if you don't know.
Well, yeah, because you're shooting blindly. Like you literally have no idea what. I mean, you
Hmm.
can you could be like, yeah, I'm gonna go hunt these slopes, or I'm gonna go hunt, these ridge systems, but you have no idea if it's good habitat, if it's bad habitat, if it's high stem count, if it's been timbered or not. The maps are topographically usually fairly accurate, but the vegetation changes on a very regular basis. So having those resources that you can call and lean on, or ask, find on social media, like I said, like we talked about, you're not asking for a spot, but you're just asking for stuff that gives you a head start on what you
Hmm.
can expect. You know,
Yeah,
um,
when I see this on a map, is this hardwoods? Is this pines? We
yeah,
were talking to, I think what I did, I can't remember if it was in the episode with Kelsey Moss or not. Um, but it was definitely in our conversation. He was talking about the way that mountain laurel looks
yep,
on a map. Like, good to know. It's good to know where mountain laurel. It definitely comes to play in hunting deer and hunting mature deer. But if you're planning on setting up in a big old laurel patch, Good luck,
it plays a lot into navigating.
Yeah, it does. It
If
does.
you don't know that you can flip your like toggle off to leaf off on your mapping software and be able to see like that soft green mat that changes in the going from hardwoods into a into some slope structure that drops into a creek drainage, you're going to have a bad time accessing in the morning in the dark. You're going to have a
Yep.
really bad time, you
Yep.
know.
And
So
it's tough.
yeah.
And we've harped on that for a minute, but it is important. I think it goes into a lot of my planning.
The thing I wanted to talk about a little next, Parker, if you're okay with it, is I think a lot of guys have the tendency to look at places based on just where they're going to go in general, but they don't necessarily look at something towards the eyes of the part of the season that they're actually going to that piece of property in. So like if you're going to travel to go hunt somewhere, if you're going to hunt your area in the southeast and you know you can't hunt it until X window of time, you should be thinking about what's happening on the landscape when you can get there and tailoring your scouting to benefit that process, right? So like
Yeah.
if I'm going to go, it does me no good if I have a bunch of work lined up and I can't hunt North Carolina, hypothetically speaking, until November 15th. Well, it does me no good to go try to find velvet deer in early season food source habitat because they're not going to be there. Like I could be so stoked and run cameras and find all those bucks, but I really need to be looking for like mid to late season sign from last year with boots on the ground and looking at areas that I think will maintain high stem count thickness or leaf on cover late into the season that they can go to for security cover because that's the time of the year that I'm going to be able to hunt, you know?
Yeah. And it's totally different when you're looking at what you're talking about right now, which is out of state hunting and like very narrowed down windows of time that you're going to be hunting a place. Completely different on hunting at home. Like there's so far it seems like most of the things that we've talked about is without breaking a sweat. Really, that's it. It's definitely things that you can do in the summertime, but it plays out a little bit different on home deer, and it goes back into what we were talking about earlier with um, the having so much time to devote. Like there are things that you can do right now, um, locally that suit that matter just as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take away from the conversation or where you're going right now, but it is two totally different styles
Oh
of
no,
scouting for that.
yeah, I agree. It's but they're two. It's almost like I don't even know if they're two different because I hunt my home state. I do exactly the same things when I hunt my home state as I do out of state in my preparation, and I think that it's important to remember. It's like my even if my ability to put like I it may be closer for me to like accessibly go put out cameras or walk on the ground here, but I'm still thinking through my planning the same way I would in
Hmm.
state as I am out of state. So my strategy doesn't change whether I'm in North Carolina or Alabama or Minnesota. Like I'm doing the same process. And 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 when I'm in state, I just have more resources at my disposal because I could actually go validate my feelings and thoughts about something. I can be like, you know what, I've got 4 spare hours
Yeah,
this afternoon. I'm going to go take off and go walk through this marsh or go hike this ridge system and be able to determine whether or not I think that my what I'm speculating is accurate or not. And that kind of is the next step of the section of conversation is like once you've kind of gone through all those preliminary discussions and figuring out where you want to be, and you feel strong, you feel good about your knowledge of the area you're going to is like actually going and putting boots on the ground and looking at stuff this time of the year. But I
yeah,
think that it's important to think about like when you're actually going to be hunting it, and don't look at it with an early season eye if you can't hunt it until November. Don't look at it with a November eye if you can only hunt it for your September opener if that's what you're opening on. You know.
yeah. Well, it's all things that can be done together, in my
Yep.
opinion. Like I've said this a couple times, but it's yes and like because everything that you're talking about can be done. I mean, honestly, in your sit down on the couch time, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much everything you've mentioned in the same time frame, you're able to, you should be able to balance those two things,
Yep.
in that prep. And what it does, feeding the no days off idea already, um, it adds more time, more. We talked about you can spend 9 days on the ground or so in a out of state situation for most guys, 15 collectively if you're able to take a scouting trip. It all of a sudden adds like those work times that you've dedicated to that adds to those 15 days that you might have.
Correct.
Um, it's just finding the time to do it, man. Like that is it. I feel like it's the excuse that I hear. I just think I ain't
I don't
got
have
time
time.
to do all that. You do have time. We all have time, and I
Yep.
know that because I see that little green dot next to y'all's Facebooks.
Scrolling.
Whenever I'm saying I don't have time because I'm scrolling Facebook, I
Yeah.
see those little green dots. I know that we have time to do this, and that's really what this series is about.
Well, and
It's
in the summertime, it's really good. Like a lot of guys get in the habit of like they're resting up and relaxing, and they want to go scout midday because that's what you do in the fall. But wake up early, like go out scout until 9 a.m. Get back, like scout 3 4 hours. You're not doing anything that's going to ruin any property. But if you
yeah,
need if going and driving or hiking a piece of property with some coffee in your hand helps you out, like you have the availability to make it happen. And I know folks have families and lives and other obligations. It's like, well, if your family has plans for the middle of the day and you got to go to some festival or some, family event, like, go until 9 a.m. in the morning, come back, shower up, do what you got to do, and make time. If you're interested, you know, just like you said, Parker, there's no excuse. If your goal is to shoot a mature deer, um, the only one that's controlling the outcome of that is yourself at the end of the day.
yeah,
You may have some intangibles that happen, but you know, don't make excuses. And it's just like I always tell guys, I don't care what you shoot. If you want to shoot a year and a half old or 2 year old buck every single year, be my power. But I bet like it's in your power. Do whatever you want. Like I'm going to support you on it. But I better not hear you complaining about why you haven't killed a 4 or a 5 year old deer. Because if you do,
yeah,
I'm going to call you out on it. Because it's not that they don't exist; it's that you're not willing to put the work in to find them.
sure,
So I think it's important to remember that like we've talked a lot about the context of this of your strategy from the perspective of if you're traveling to hunt. And I want to emphasize that my strategy is the same whether I'm going out of state or in state. So part of the reason that this conversation is really applicable if you're hunting in your own backyard is because you should still be taking as much of an intentional deep dive into the place you're hunting in state as you would if you're going to have to travel out of state. So for me, something that I think a lot of guys face, and maybe I'm wrong here, is the closest places that I hunt are still a 45-minute drive or longer. Anytime my home areas are anywhere from 45 minutes to 3 hours from my actual house. So because of that, like it's still an endeavor for me to go hunt somewhere. And ideally, sometimes I'm hunting 2 day spans. I might sleep in the truck, on a local spot, or, I may, I just can't get there every single day because I don't have a back 40 to go hunt, So when I'm talking about like lead development, determining what states you're going to go hunt, or if you're going to hunt your home state, what WMAs you're going to hunt, narrowing that scope down to within your state. Are you going to travel to hunt different quotas, or are you going to hunt a specific WMA the entire time? And it apply that same strategy of starting broad and narrowing down. If you're going to hunt a WMA, what 5 spots on that WMA are you going to hunt each season? What 5 pieces of property of that WMA are you going to break down? If you're going to hunt 5 states, what spots in those 5 states are you going to hunt? What leads can you get for those spots? And the same strategy from a grand scale applies all the way down to, even if you were going to apply it to your back 40, I would still use the same thing. What sections of my back 40 am I going to hunt? What stands am I going to have up? How am I going to spend time in them? What parts of the season are they going to be best for? So like we talked about earlier, start broad with your lead development, like figure out, build a community, a network of people around you. Start now, build some friendships, reach out on social media, find people in your area that can be resources for you. Break down what WMAs you're going to hunt in your state or what states you're going to travel to. For your backyard, are you hunting public? Are you hunting private? If you're hunting mostly public, start doing your research on what resources are available to you surrounding that property, as well as how you can access it. Anything that you can do and find and write down that's applicable to your success and strategy on that property, you should be doing right now before you ever set boots on the ground when you get there.
Let's talk about an ideal scenario. So let's say a fellow's listening to this and he is 19, 20 years old, got the bug real
Young
bad.
gun.
Yeah, young gun, got time, no family, pretty free schedule. Is there a time when you think, hey, if you've got all the time in the world, maybe you don't have to do all of this. It might save you time, but is there value in like no leads, finding a spot, finding the closest place you can to you, and just simply putting boots on the ground all summer long
I
before
mean,
you ever do any of the stuff you mentioned?
I mean, I guess my perspective, like, there's always value in putting boots on the ground. I would say I would not at least attempt to try to build some friends and generate some
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
lead
for sure.
information. Just because, and I say that not to say it's not that it wouldn't, like, now if you're unsuccessful at that, then yeah, I mean, you have to work with what you're given. And for the guy who's done all of that, the next step in the process is boots on the ground. You're just starting further along than the young guy who's just getting started that maybe didn't have the chance to build all of that rapport prior to. But regardless, whether you're a young guy or a veteran and you don't have the ability to do everything we've talked about previously, I think that you have to start boots on the ground in the summer to familiarize yourself just with the layout of the property to make sure that what you're seeing on a map is accurate. And like we talked about earlier, vegetation changes are fairly regular. And in the Southeast, we deal with things like hurricanes and high
Yeah.
winds all the time. So, like, you may go into a property or maybe looking at a property on the map and it looks great. And you go in there and all of a sudden you didn't realize that because a hurricane came through Western North Carolina, now there's trees down all over your property that has changed the patterns, changed your access, and maybe made it unattainable to hunt. Maybe it made it really difficult to hunt. Maybe it made it better to hunt.
Dude,
But
there's things like that it's absolutely necessary and more valuable to put boots on the ground. I can think of a spot right now that's been a go-to place of mine, and I
mm-hmm.
just kind of hadn't spent much time there in the last couple of years. And me and Walter went in and hunted it when he came this last year, and it was a cutover, wasn't on the
Yep.
map, wasn't on anything, but they had cut that joker over, and it was like, well, crap, that was a wasted day,
Yeah.
that a wasted sit. That's like, man, if I would have known that, I would have planned this a little bit differently.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And you don't ever know those things until you go and see it with your own
Yep.
eyes. And so I think, I might would say that if for a guy who's got the time to invest and wants to just go put boots on the ground, I don't know that there is
It's not a negative to doing that.
there's not a negative, but there's no substitute on the leads that you're talking about. That
I,
definitely saves time.
it's and we've spent a lot of time talking about that, and I think the reason for it is if you have the ability to generate those leads and that information ahead of time, it's only going to make you that much more efficient. It's not to say, we're just getting that part of the conversation now. It's not to take away from the fact that I still think it's very important to go summer scout and put boots on the ground. Now, I'm not saying that you should be figuring out where every deer is in the summer. I don't necessarily feel like that's always applicable, but understanding the property that you're hunting and then putting your knowledge to that place so that the first time you go in there to walk in to hunt or go somewhere, or it's not, the first time isn't in season. You should have a general understanding of what are your property boundaries like, what topography you're going to deal with. Like Parker said earlier, you don't want to go walk into a rhododendron thicket like if you're a guy hunting the mountains in the South and you don't know it's there, you set yourself up like you set yourself up for a bad time if you don't have an understanding of what your property is like at all. Um, and that's where your summer scouting comes into play. To me, it's less about finding the deer and more about learning your property.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And that's for guys who like to hang up a trail camera or not.
Yeah,
If you're just a
both.
guy who likes to go in and read sign, it certainly helps to know how to get to an area. Even if in the summertime you're not going to see much sign, maybe historical,
Yep.
um, maybe some historical, it might catch your eye, but for the most part, it might be there, but you just can't see it as well during the summer because it's covered by vines and everything else. But knowing the lay of the land is, I mean, it's so stinking valuable, and
Yep.
you can, you can do it on Onyx to a certain point. Like you can be like, okay, a reasonable expectation, I think, is okay, but you're never going to know until you go. And more times than not, where the actual terrain feature is, or the actual sign or deer feature,
Yep.
it's usually not right where I thought it might be. It might
Yep.
be close. It's going to be close, but it's not usually right on the X
Yep.
that the pin that I put down.
Yep, and even
Um,
even if I was in season, if I was hunting a place blind in season, my first sit is usually just a shot in the dark, and then I'm scouting once I get down out of the tree. So
yeah.
it's the same principle. It's like if you're just from a summertime perspective, you're just trying to eliminate that shot in the dark for your backyard properties, so that you don't end up in that position where you're like, man, I'm going in this morning, I have no idea what to expect, you know it's not saying that you're not going to go in there and learn something, but if you're a guy who just hunts sign, your time is probably past. Like the or like turkey season and prior, from January until end of March, is your window of gold to find your sign to start making applicable. If you didn't do that, now you should be focusing on looking at understanding the layout of your property and then taking applicable knowledge. So, like, let's say that that deer um, like these like specific big transitional funnels in your region, or that you're dealing with like a big topography bowl on the map, going and validating how that bowl sets up, possibly even how the wind moves in there, and like where primary bedding may be in position to that bowl, so that you understand what your access route's going to look like, and then you can hypothesize what a buck may do during the fall, and then when you're actually in there hunting it during the fall, like how you can shift and move, but you're not necessarily looking at it from the perspective of like, I have to find out where he's going to be in fall right now. Like, you may get lucky and find some sign like that, like Parker said, but the odds are that you probably won't. So don't go looking for something
hmm
that's not there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. So, all right. I'm coming up with different scenarios and trying to make sure that every every person listening can find something out of it. Uh, we have talked a lot about places that you are not familiar with. So going and verifying things that you don't know in spots that in places that you have never been, and doing that during the summertime. That's pretty base level. But I would say a huge percentage of us know where we plan to hunt for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. We've got a lot of this. If you're talking about at home, we've got a lot of this stuff narrowed down already. I do. I know where I'm going to be. That's going to
Meaning like the
that.
property.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
the property. I've hunted. I've known these properties for a long time. I've been hunting them. But what I'm interested in doing is like I know there's big deer that I'm not killing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people find themselves in that position. They hunt the same places, but they're not hunting them as effectively as they could be. And so a lot of this summer scouting looks a little bit different than verifying things. There's some things coming into play in the summertime, like finding the buck that's in the area. What are you doing at home? I know you've got places like this, spots
Mm-hmm.
that you've been to your whole life or a few years.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing in the summertime in those areas to try to narrow down where a big buck might be at, rather than just woodsmanship stuff? You know what I mean?
I mean, I would be. I think the first thing would be like, if I haven't done it already, I would be trying to go explore parts of the property that I think he could be coming from or passing through. And then just getting an understanding of, are these areas, because some of those places they just don't lay out well for me to hunt, but it pays for me to understand how he uses them. And for a great example of that would be like, if whether you're dealing with real rugged mountains or big topography or big wetland areas, those deer are going to funnel through certain spots based on just the historical layout of the property. So maybe you have a big creek that runs through this section of the property that you don't realize how deep it is or how steep the banks are until you actually get there and look at it. Or maybe you have these steep sides of these hills that you don't realize they're that steep, or they have these benches on them. So if it's a section of a property that I'm already hunting that I don't really go in, I'm familiarizing myself with areas that I'm not spending my time in that I think that buck could be coming from. If it's a piece of property where like things are changing, for example, on one of the pieces, like the piece of private that I hunt, they timber pines off of that property. So, every year there's pine growth coming up progressively. So like it pays for me to make a trip to go determine like, hey, well, like how visible is it under the pines this year? Like, can I get through there? Can I not get through there? What do I think's happening? Do I think this is going to change where the deer are? Did a logger come in and make some shifts that I'm not aware of? In areas where I feel like that buck's coming from, so I can understand how his pattern might be changing year over year. So I guess that's about it's.
Yeah, that's good, dude. It's covering more ground in the places you're already familiar with. Like, and I can think of very few places for me that there's just a section of land there isn't a section of land around that I haven't explored. Like, I have not covered every single inch of every single property I hunt.
And I think
You know,
it's pretty like a lot of us, I think when we're in season, we have a tendency to get into a habit where, especially if you're using trail cameras or you're hunting very specific sign, you're kind of hunting like a hub, and then you have little spokes that come off that hub. And it's like more often than not, you have things that you kind of are patternable in the sense that you like hunting certain spots or you feel confident hunting certain spots. And then you just never really make the attempt to push in to a different area of that segment because maybe you're too afraid to blow deer out. Maybe you don't think it's worth getting in there. Maybe you just are like, hey, I don't have time to get in there. All that stuff that you can figure out now and kind of start to piece together those places that you never really go or haven't gone, even if it's like, man, I've really never walked down to the bottom of that north facing slope. Like, I don't really know what's going there, but the buck always tends to come from maybe that he comes from that direction
mm-hmm.
sometimes, it's like, well, it just, you may be able to kill him where your camera's at or where that scrape is, but it may be, you may not realize that it's easier for you to kill him from where he's coming from. If you just go walk over there, and once again, you're not looking for sign. You're looking at it from the perspective of what does the land look like here, and how would I set up here if there was good sign here? And you're in your mind mentally hunting it as if it was the time of the year that you're going to be hunting that deer.
Man, a lot of personal experience that could back that up for me.
Yeah.
That could back up the things that you're saying. I think familiarizing yourself. I'm not going to tell more personal stories. It's not story time with Parker. But yeah, just a lot of things to back up exactly what you're saying. I think
Sounds like a podcast series we need to have. Story time with Parker.
Story time with Parker. Because I really can. I can relate a lot of what you're talking about right now in a lot of this discussion. And for me, I'm having ideas and sparks as we're talking about. Like, there is a lot of value in knowing where a buck spends his summertime at. Like, I have places that I know I can go into December when it's the rut and kill deer locally. Like, I know the hot areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
I spend 2 months before December feeling like the world's worst bow hunter. Like I can't figure out a dadgum thing, and I think a lot of it's because I've not I've not figured out where these deer are coming from to get to this place. I know that
Hmm.
they're going to be here at this time. A lot of that is because I haven't used cameras much,
Yeah.
and a lot of the camera usage I have used is I'm still kind of putting them in the spots where I feel like the deer are going to be in December, right? Like
Yeah. The
to this point.
the camera thing was really helpful for me in running when I started running cameras all season long. And I like to run my cameras on scrapes or travel corridors, not always necessarily like and by scrapes and travel corridors I mean like funnels that I feel like lead between bed and food, but may not necessarily be like, okay, well, I know for sure there's going to be a big buck here. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is I run my cameras more for inventory than I do for anything else. But the benefit of that is it gives you an idea of kind of how the deer are using it, and doing it on video is so helpful in running your cameras on video as opposed to photo, because you can actually see the direction the deer are walking, how they're moving through the landscape. Like, do they feel confident? Are they walking through there in broad daylight with confidence, or are they like they look like they shouldn't be where they are when they're there? You know, that kind of a thing, as well as just understanding direction. That's obviously the biggest part of it. But the cameras have been super helpful, and then just not running them on like your primary rut spots, like putting them in bedding areas and being like, this is a wash. I'm not going to come back here until the end of the season,
Hmm.
or on those big travel hubs, and then just check it in December, and be planning for that intel later or the following year. Be like, oh, I know this area was fired up, next year, for spring.
Yeah.
But my early season spots are usually not the same as my fall spots, like my late
Sure.
fall or my rut spots. Like I'm hunting different deer, different bucks in different time frames, typically, just because of the way the properties are huntable.
Do you feel like in that early season you're doing more, you know, um, doe hunting, just going out to shoot a deer, period, and so you're not really willing to risk going after
I'm a
a big deer, or do you do that still?
I probably should get in the habit of shooting does early, just to warm myself up for season. That's probably not a bad idea, but I'm a habitual late season doe guy. Like, I shoot my does in December. For us here, that's after the rut.
Sure.
So I'm typically shooting deer. My does are last because I know very definitively what food source they're coming to. It's easy to pattern them. The bedding is hyper specific because it's leaf off. They're dealing with only high stem count cover, very specific cover, so I know where they're going and what they're doing. And I can hunt them. I can hunt them from way back with a rifle.
Yeah.
So I'm usually shooting my does with a rifle. Um, but for early season, I'm really trying to key in on um, like a combination of like compounding things. So it's hot here in the southeast, so our bucks tend to prioritize cooler, wetter areas, so places close to water. Um, and the counter to that is because both like I don't find that deer are like close to lake edges as much as they are close to like creek drainages. So a lake edge would mean they would have to expose themselves to a lot of broad daylight, whereas like a creek drainage that runs up into like a big holler, where they've got like a little stream up at the head of that like big drainage, they'll get water there and bed close to that, versus you know water is in perspective. It's water in proximity to security cover, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm looking for water in proximity to security cover, in proximity to travel to food, and understanding that in the early season they have no pressure. So I want to find food that's close to that, to those compounding things, close to where he can bed like comfortably and not be overrun with other deer, and then have access to water, and then be in a comfortable position to use the topography of the land or the structure of the land to get to his primary food source in the evening. And I used to be, and still am at times, like hunting my deer in the early season depends on whether I think they're more attainable in the morning or in the evening. Because it's so hot here, there are a lot of times where I tend to see the inverse of what guys in the Midwest do, which is they only hunt afternoons. They are super hardcore afternoon guys in early season. A lot of times I don't see our southern deer get up before dark.
No,
Like
yeah.
they just stay bedded. But what they do is in the mornings in early season in September and October is they'll be like it may be 75 or 80 degrees or cooler until like 10 a.m. So their movement may be slower and they'll meander and work and feed and get a lot of that movement out early. And then they'll go bed down. And then based on camera intel, we typically see them get up again at like 12 or 1 p.m. And they get up and go to water. And I think a lot of like the Mississippi Deer Lab studies reiterate that is that they move within like a 60-yard or 75-yard area of their bed to water and browse, and then they lay back down. And they'll be there until dark. At least that's my experience here hunting southern habitat that doesn't have a lot of food sources. Like we're talking, I'm not hunting peanut fields. I'm not hunting like big field edges or anything like that. I don't have any of that access. The best agriculture I have around where I hunt is cattle pasture. Like, so
Chicken farm.
chicken
The only
farms.
farms
So
we got, chicken farms.
the only farms we got is chicken and pig farms. So that's pretty much it. So I'm trying to like get really close to those deer in early season. And if I think that there's a spot where I could catch him in an afternoon, I'm not going to shy away from trying to make that hunt, happen. But it's got to be a real specific scenario because I think it's easier in a lot of spots in the South to get in and hunt them in the morning early than it is to hunt them in the afternoon and get them cut them off coming back to bedding when they're consistent.
One thing that I struggle to figure out in big woods is that food aspect of it. It's very easy in October when white oaks are dropping, acorns are dropping. It's a food source that you can see very easily. But in the big woods, you got so much different browse and woody browse, and like trying to find a deer in the summertime. You've got terrain features, but that food aspect is really tough to figure out if you're on public and you don't have the ability to feed or put mineral out. It seems like I talked to so many people on private who's like, yeah, that's how we find our big deer in the summer, mineral licks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't do that.
Yep.
Like, what do you do? What is this? What's a summertime food source that you found in big woods? Or have you? Like,
I have no
do you
idea.
have anything that you're going on?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No. And I say that jokingly because like the reality is, at least for the deer that I hunt, like you said, Parker, there's so much food that's there. And I think a lot of guys get so caught up on, a lot of podcasts or videos or guys, they hunt in the Midwest or they hunt on private land, even in the South. And there's like a destination food source or a place they're going. Like a lot of the public that I hunt just doesn't exist. Like they may be going a direction. Like what I try to do, because it's easier for me to do this, is to boil down the direction I think they're going to leave bedding based on what's the most advantageous for them. So for example, if I'm hunting a piece of property where maybe like I know that on private, there's a new clear cut way over there. I have no idea if they're actually going to food over there, but the direction of that clear cut corresponds with like good topographical features, the wind direction, an opposite direction from access of people. Like if it ties together with other things that benefit the deer from a security perspective, I'm gonna look for path of travel between those two destinations and assume that they're going that way. And then I'm gonna let my cameras or my time spent in the stand validate whether that's the case or not. Ideally, going back to summer scouting or just pre-scouting in general, one of my favorite things is validating that with like coming and going tracks. So if you have a hypothesis that deer are feeding somewhere, like I refer to a lot of our deer in public across North Carolina, from western to eastern North Carolina, as transient deer, because a lot of our public they're not living on, they're moving between private to private. And they're shifting through the public. Sometimes they're betting on the public and moving out. Sometimes they're betting on the private and moving through the public to other private. There's a bunch of different versions of that, but they're transient. They're not really there all the time. So for me, if I can find a place where those deer have deemed it safe enough to consistently travel to and from, especially if there's buck tracks that are going to and coming from a specific area, regardless of whether it's the same buck or not. I'm really going to take note of that and be like, okay, this is a good sign. I have no idea what they're going to over there, but I know they're right here. And I know they're coming through this spot. So that's typically like what I'm looking for, because I can't control, like, it's even hard to figure out and control like where bedding is, like it is for most of our season, because there's so much of it. So I can't really control where they're bedding because they can bed so many places, and I can't really control what they're eating because there's so much food for them, that the only thing I can control is path of travel from a security perspective, because that's not going to change. So that's what I'm looking for, is like how are they going to go from point A to point B the safest way possible? And usually that stays consistent year over year. And it's something that you can scout and try to find year over year in summertime, in springtime, in the fall. Like that's a strategy that, like, you can deploy that strategy and then look for the sign within the sign in those spots. Like, you're finding that security travel spot, and then all of a sudden you find a big hub scrape in that corridor, and now you're in the zone.
Yeah, that's I have not heard transient deer, but I like it because I feel like a lot of the deer I kill are going to be on corners of properties. I've heard other people talk about the same thing, corners being
but they're there because they're transient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find I don't off the public around here, I don't bump a lot of deer. Like most of the public that I'm on is safe. Where I'm getting really like tiptoey and trying to be real quiet and set up is on property lines, because the public it's big woods, not a ton of bedding. Occasionally there's places that that are different where there might be a thicket or something like that, but I'd say for the most part it's all going to be those property lines and things like that. And I've seen that and heard that from most people in the state, in Alabama, for sure.
Well, I think that your property boundaries, you got to remember that, like, the public, they're not doing much management. So the highest density of compounding features typically exist on your property boundaries. So whether you're hunting a deer in the public or on the fringe of the public, usually you can find something that points you in the right direction on that property boundary, whether you're going to hunt him there or you're just going to, like, be able to say, oh, he's going this way in or out of the public, and be able to determine where you need to be off of that. That's usually I would say that's a huge tip, if you aren't already doing that.
That's good stuff, dude. We've been talking for like an hour and a half. I don't know if you realize that.
I mean, it's not uncommon.
Yeah. Normal phone call conversation with us. I feel like there's a lot of meat here, dude. A lot of good stuff. A lot of things for people to chew on right now, especially that apply right this second. I can be doing these things immediately.
What everybody wants to know is, where's Parker hunting this fall?
Parker's hunting in Alabama and Tennessee, and that's pretty much it.
That's it? That's good.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not gonna go chase whitetails in Wyoming?
No. The closest thing I might get to another state is like Arkansas, because my mom and dad are moving there.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so, but dude, the Arkansas non-resident license is crazy expensive.
Yep.
So I don't know.
That's how South Carolina is here. If you want to go hunt South Carolina, it's stupid expensive. It's like,
I mean, I get $3 tags here. When we do series like this, it's usually where either mine or Walter's mind is at the moment, and so no days off came from that.
Mm-hmm.
It came from this, like, dude, I gotta sharpen up. Where I'm at as a hunter here at home. I proved to myself last year shooting that nice buck. Hey, I can do this. I know these places. I know the area. I just got to be a little more efficient. And
in the no days off mindset, I'll throw one more thing out. That's like one of the things that I always forget to do, but I've been trying to be better about it. And I know a lot of guys push this off, is like, go out and test hang your gear in your saddle and your stand.
Yeah.
Before season, like, literally do a test run with all your sticks, like, in the evenings before you, like, go in for dinner. Like, take 10 minutes, just do a hang and hunt in your yard, and like
in the
test your
dark.
in the dark, or like after dark or before dinner, whatever's easiest for you. But like do it a couple times. Like I can't tell you the number of times I have like crapped an early season hunt because I just am like, oh, I totally don't even have a cam strap for this stick, or something stupid that I have a bolt that's loose, or I haven't ironed out the rust on camming over my platform on my stand, or you know, um, just your just run your gear a little bit. Like it's seems so stupid. Even if you're a climber guy, like just set your climber up quietly on a tree. Like just do it a couple times. Like loosen up. You know,
I mean, it's not a secret that the first
there
time you go into a place is your best opportunity, and we throw a lot of hunts on that opening day hunt that really are a pretty good opportunity hunt.
a great
If you're doing all the
opportunity.
things we're talking about, I mean, if you're
Yep.
doing all of this prep, that first day in can be a really good one.
Yep.
And it's gonna, if you clang your sticks together because you didn't have a good system on carrying them up a tree, it is ruined. He's not coming.
Yeah.
He's if it's early season on opening day and you're doing it right, he's probably close. He ain't coming. It's just
Yep.
done. You might as
And
well be done.
and people look at like those early sits. I used to for sure as like, oh, I got so much more
Yep.
season to go. Like no big deal. Like if I like these are I'm knocking the rust off with these first few sits of the year. And it's like actually those are like your best possible sits. Like as far as like man, those deer are just the most consistent, the most reliable, the most susceptible for being shot the first week of deer season as they are
Mm-hmm.
any other time of the year. Like it's I used to not be an early season guy and I got proven wrong the last couple of years. Like I have consistently been on more bucks that I know about, like on trail camera in early season than any other time of the year. Now I may see a lot of bucks in the rut, but they're just miscellaneous bucks and
Yeah.
getting opportunities. But deer that I know about, those deer, I am the best time to harvest those deer. I have really firmly become a believer in it being like the first week of season.
Here in Alabama, I have well, anywhere I go, buddy, I've got it's a doe lust, man. I love killing doe.
A
I
doe
love
lust.
it. Freaking love everything about it. Um, my problem has been uh, when you hunt Alabama, you start hunting. I start hunting beginning of October, and man, I want to kill every single doe that I see, and I'm hunting these, hunting feed trees, acorns, persimmons, and you see does, and you want to shoot every single one of them. But I've tried to get that out of the way, and that's part of the reason for keeping the Tennessee license so close. I can kill 3 does a day in Tennessee, and I can also hunt it before my season opens here in Alabama. It
Hmm.
opens late September usually in Tennessee, so you got some time. And I've structured it that way because my hope is that I can get some of that doe lust out of the way. It doesn't take much, a
Some
couple,
doe lust.
yeah, one or two, one
You
or
need,
two. I just
you need a
got
t-shirt with that on
doe lust.
it.
I've got it. Um, but
Oh,
but and it just goes to back up what you're saying. I believe, and I've seen it from own experiences and also other guys. That first week of the season here at home, I'm trying to reserve it for trying to shoot a buck that I know is there.
yep.
I think it is one of the easiest times. If you're hunting sign and you find a hot feature, that is one of the best odds you have of killing your deer if you find him on this tree
Yep.
or on a feed tree. October is a great time to kill him. But you can't do that if you're killing every single doe that
Yeah,
walks by.
that's why I usually now if it's I'm not saying if it's not a stupid easy spot, like if I'm right next to the road and I know that I'm gonna have does there every evening and it's an easy way where I can go in and not blow something up, like sure I'll take like a super short evening hunt and go smack a doe. But for the most
But
part,
you're probably going to do that after that opening week when you feel like your odds are the highest. It's like
exactly.
shooting a doe during the rut. You don't.
I'm prioritizing the first week or even 2 weeks of season at targeting my target buck in his early season pattern and assuming it's going to change or shift nocturnal after that. And then it's like, okay, if I want to go shoot a doe, I'll go shoot a doe, or I'll go change properties to a place that hasn't been
Yeah.
pressured, or, like that's the nice thing about for me here. Like I can hunt opener in North Carolina. It's like first week of September. Hunt that, and then once I get through that week or two, those deer are going to get nocturnal till October-ish and kind of lock down a little bit. I'll shift and go hunt Virginia for their opener in October, first week or two of October, and kind of be able to double dip that
Yep.
early season opportunity in both states. And I know Tennessee and Alabama, you can kind of do the same thing. And I know other guys in other states that do that as well, where you're kind of staggering your openers to be able to get to extend that best possible window of time, across, 4 weeks as opposed to 1 or 2,
That's right.
So,
With
but yeah,
opener, if you're gonna devote a lot of time to opener, which spoiler alert, we're gonna do a whole series devoted to opener, devoted to the opener. In different states coming here in September, I think is when we're gonna actually, or October. It'll be soon. So that'll be a lot of fun.
that'd be super cool.
But with the opener also comes the most pressure I see anywhere that I go is
Yeah,
opener. The
just for the
most
weekend, typically though.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
weekend pressure, but it's gonna be a lot. Um, I try not to let it bother me, but because it's really not bothered the deer yet,
yep,
that first weekend. But man, I still with everything in me, I see a lot of people. You'll have these waves. Opening week, deer die. After that, deer stop dying. I think it's a mixture of there's less people in the woods and the deer have gotten used to the pressure. But that first week, man, it can be magical. It can be a really good time.
yep.
Um, Jake, dude, let's wrap this thing up. We have talked all over the place, really. I mean, but I think a lot of good stuff, a lot of gold in this podcast conversation. Like normal with you, you're a smart dude, and appreciate the time that you've given us today. So
Yeah,
thank you
man.
so much,
I'm
buddy.
happy to be here, dude. It was a great time as always, and um, just stoked to get to season. We're 3 months away from some places, counting down the moments.
That's right, dude.
It's
Three
gonna be.
months away. I will see you soon though at the Whitetail Road Show.
Yep, we'll be at the
So
Whitetail
I'm looking
Road
forward
Show
to
here
that.
soon. If you haven't already, buy your ticket for Georgia. Come out and see us,
Yep.
hang out. So,
Yep, it's going to be a good time. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the No Days Off series. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that little like button and subscribe to our channel. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, check us out at, let's see, at SoCo_Hunt on Instagram, at The Southern Collective on Facebook. So, yeah, Jake, we'll talk to you later, buddy. And you guys, we will see you on the next podcast.